Hi, I want to conclude our lectures on randomness and random walks with a very simple applied model, something I'm going to call the finite memory random walk model. And then I want to give some summaries of some of the things we've learned about thinking about randomness and random walks and applying those ideas to the real world. So let's talk about this finite memory random walk. Here's the idea. The idea is that our random walk model, your value depended on every single shock all the way through. In a finite memory random walk, your value only depends on the previous 5 shocks, the previous 7 shocks. Let me show you. So the value of something at time t, instead of being all of the shocks, instead of starting at 0 and adding all the way up to t, just includes the previous 5 periods. So you can think of there being a window like this, and that window sort of slides along over time. As time passes, you sort of just take the last 5 things that have occurred. So for example, if I want to look at the value of something at time 10, it's going to depend on x10 plus x9 plus x8 plus x7 plus x6. Then in time 11, we're going to add in the shock that we get at time 11. But then we're going to take this shock that we had at time 6, the random variable, and chop that off. Now what are these x6, x7s, x8s, x9s? They could be 2 things in particular. One is they could be employees. So imagine you bring in 1 new employee each period and 1 employee retires. Well, this would be how good is your new employee and how good was your employee that you just let go. Alternatively, you can think of these as products. If each year you have a new product line, the sales of each of those product lines could be a random variable. So you want to think of the value of the firm, it depends on the current constellation of products. Each year you bring out a new product and you wipe out an old product. So you can have a car company that maybe has 5 models of cars. Maybe every 5 years they bring out a new model of one of those cars and dump the old model. And this tells you in some sense the value of their portfolio of cars. That's the idea. What I want to do is I just want to use this to show you how we can take our simple random walk model and make it slightly more realistic to capture something in the real world. Well, let's use this to look at sports. Sports is a good place for this model because you can think of a team as consisting of a set of players, and every year the teams draft new players. So these are the new people they draft, and these are the people that they retire. And we can think of, does this capture what competition looks like among teams? So here's my model, really simple. 28 teams. Each team's value depends on 5 players. So you can think of these as basketball teams. And the champion is going to be whichever team has the highest value at time t. And I'll run this thing for 28 years. I'm just going to do this. You can do this on a spreadsheet. Just run it for 28 years, and we'll compute the value of each team and crown one of them the champion. And let's see how it works. Well, what we want to do is you can think, okay, that's a model, and it's going to, predict things that are going on. But we can also use it to predict other stuff that maybe we wouldn't have expected. So once we have this model, we can predict things along a lot of domains. So one thing we can do is we can predict the number of champions. So how many champions would you expect the model to produce? What we see is that in the 28 years, the model produces 16, 13, and 16 different champions. Now, I've only circled these 3, and the reason why is this graph number 4 is the NBA. Graph number 5, bar number 5 is the NFL. Graph number 6 is the NHL. And graph number 7 is Major League Baseball. So it's interesting if you look at the model and then you look at the real data over the last 28 years, you see that they're remarkably close. Well, let's look at something else, the most championships won. Again, here's our model, and here's the NBA, here's the NFL, here's the NHL, and here's Major League Baseball. Again, fairly hard to distinguish which is the model and which is the real world. What if we look at the longest streaks? Well, longest streaks, the model always produced 1 of 5, but the actual data, the most we got was 3. Now, that's not surprising in a way, because if you think of it, sports teams, it's probably very hard to win 4 in a row because other teams really start gunning for you, and they revamp their lineups in such a way that they're all trying to beat you. So it's very hard for a sports team to win 5 in a row, whereas in my model, that was more likely to happen. But overall, if you look at the 3 things, distinct champions, most championships, and longest streaks, we saw that all 3 of those things sort of lined up. So when we talked about why we model, one of the reasons we model is, one is we construct these very simple models. So say, what if we think of team performance as being just a sum of random decisions? What does that tell us? It tells us there should be a whole bunch of different winners, lots of distinct champions, that the most championships would expect someone to win in a 20-year period is like about between 5 and 8, and that's also true. And we shouldn't expect any incredibly long streaks because of the regression to the mean phenomenon. And all 3 of these things hold true in the data. So by constructing that simple model, we're able to predict a whole bunch of stuff. So that's, again, one of the real values of models. We construct them for one reason, and then they can predict all sorts of other stuff. Let me just give a quick summary of some of the stuff we've learned by thinking about randomness. So one is we shouldn't confuse luck with skill. There's some domains that are mostly luck, other domains that are mostly skill, and if we get a lot of data, we can figure out how much skill and how much luck. Second, there is this paradox of skill. Once we get the most successful people together, then it could be whoever wins is luck, because their skill, the differences in their skill are so slight. Third, it always makes sense to do the math on streaks and clusters. So if you see somebody win 15 times in a row, or if you think, boy, this person's getting a hot hand, or if you think, boy, this looks like a clustered set of, cancer cases or a crime, you want to do the math and find out, is that something we'd have expected to happen, or really is it a streak or a cluster? There's regression to the mean. If things are a random walk, then we'd expect to see all sorts of regression to the mean. And so we shouldn't necessarily bet that just because someone or some firm's been successful in the past, that it may be successful in the future. We also know that might be true because of the no free lunch theorem, that just because a heuristic worked in the past, like rinsing our cottage cheese, it may not work in the future. Finally, Wall Street kind of has a random walk. It's not exactly right, but it's not a bad model to think about Wall Street as having a random walk. And that's a good thing to keep in mind, because you might have a friend say to you, oh, hey, buy this stock, it's going up, it makes a ton of sense. Well, you got to think about the fact that if your friend knows that the value is going to go up, other people probably know the value is going to go up, and the value may have already gone up. And so therefore, you may be investing in something that's just a random walk. That's why, at least personally, I'm always very cautious about investing in individual stocks, because I assume that the market has probably captured all the relevant information. Then I guess one more thing, I shouldn't have said last, one more thing. We then took that random walk model and we constructed a finite memory random walk model. And with that, we were able to see that we could organize a bunch of data about number of championships, number of winning streaks, distinct champions, those sorts of things. And our model produced stuff that looked pretty close to the real data with very little effort. And it actually makes a lot of sense to think about the value of a team or the value of a firm as being something like a finite memory random walk. Again, the model helps us make sense of the world in an interesting way. Okay, so that's a lot on randomness and random walks, but it's interesting. It's also interesting to tie this back to some of the stuff we've already learned. So let's think about it in the context of path dependence. If we have a random walk, it's not path dependent, because what happens in this period doesn't depend in any way on what happened in the past. So now when we think about some dynamic sequence of events, we can ask ourselves, wow, is this a random walk? Is it path dependent? Is it a Markov process? Is a Markov process a random walk? No, it isn't, because the thing is, in a Markov process, where you go now depends on this current state you're in. So Markov process also depends on the state. So Markov processes aren't random walks. So now I've got these three things. We've got path dependence, we've got Markov processes, we've got random walks. We have lots of ways, lots of models in our heads for thinking about how events unfold. And by having lots of models in our heads, we're better able to make sense of the world. All right, thanks.